So strategic advantage at times of uncertainty. And like you said, yes, there's a lot of uncertainty, and I think it's just doubling up now. It's getting much more uncertain than ever before. So how can we bring out the best in our team, the companies, and our investment? That is the real question. Before that, I have a question. So what is the most important and urgent aspect HR and L&D leaders are looking for in programs? What do you think? If you put it in the chat. It's not a random question. What is it? Because we know that value is subjective. Just because we like something, it doesn't mean that other people need it. And as coaches and consultants, we know that. What do you think they are looking for? I can tell you that they asked more than 1,500 L&D professionals. And one result, ROI, impact. I think all of them are relevant, definitely, but by far, the highest score was scalability. This is what they want, scalability, especially in matrix organizations, because, you know, the old school pyramid, yes, let's focus on the senior leaders, but scalability is really important. How can you give people the information they need whenever they need it? So I know that we talk about uncertainty and saving lives, but at the same time, let's just pretend that we are totally evil, or you just have to remember your previous manager. How would you disengage employees and undermine the future of the organization? How would you do it? If you just put it in the chat, I'm curious. Bully them, but it's fantastic, relevant. Yeah, you could bully them. What else can you do? More pressure, poor communication, unclear priorities. Okay. So we have some ideas. I don't know if you are creative or you just remember something that happened in your previous company, probably not right now. Micromanagement, my way or highway, lived experience. That's unfortunately typical. I'm going to answer this question later on, because often the best way of fixing something is by not ruining it. And often we don't think about it. It's much easier not to eat a pizza than burning 2,000 calories. And this is the approach that we can take. And I'm going to show you exactly what I mean by that. So when everything feels uncertain, what, if anything, remains certain? This is the question. How can you future-proof companies? We know one thing. Jacob Morgan asked 140 top CEOs and 14,000 employees what we should be teaching leaders now to prepare for the future. He got back the results, and then he published the future leader. I changed the names a little bit to make them more descriptive based on his description. So Jacob Morgan had this research, and as you can see that 8 out of the 9 skills and mindsets are directly linked to how much you understand yourself and others, which is really interesting because it's so easy to ignore people skills, and often people don't realize that they are business skills. If you don't understand people, you're not going to be in business for too long. Technology is important. Yes, AI is a big buzzword, but that is only 1 out of the 9 skills and mindsets. But maybe the problem is that we think that it's soft skill. You cannot see it, you cannot measure it, so it's easier to ignore it, more difficult to optimize it. So if we know that people skills are so important, then obviously it's logical that companies spend them. They invest in people skills. If you look at a mid-sized company, this is the average they spend on an employee altogether. So that is around $4,000 per employee. So if you include coaching, training, HR, so the question is it worth it? Let's look at the results. What is it that we know for certain? We know that human skills are the real competitive advantage. So we know that people skills are the real competitive advantage. But if you fast forward a little bit, 2030, we know the demographics should look like a pyramid. Lots of young people, a few old ones. But this is 2030. That's in 4 years. It's not a pyramid anymore. You have less young people. Then if you look at Europe, then it's more like a Christmas tree. You look at Japan, that's even worse. This is the maximum, not the minimum. And this is something we need to understand. That's why it's getting more difficult to find people physically. Then we also know that it's more difficult to keep the talent. Because if you look at the engagement, Disengagement is growing. Engagement is rapidly declining. This is the US, and Europe is struggling even more. Companies spend a fortune, but it's getting worse. It's not that it doesn't work, it's declining. But there's another challenge that now it's even more difficult to support people. They spend a lot on employee engagement, well-being, but if you look at the burnout report, the burnout rate is up by 50% compared to the previous year if you look at young people, entry-level employees, and senior leaders. People are burning out. It is serious. And these are the people who should be leading and motivating others. That makes it very difficult. Is that a good investment? And this is also our challenge now. How can HR and L&D professionals can be seen as strategic partner instead of an admin function? How could the leaders get their organization future ready? They're spending the money, they are not getting the results. And also, how can coaches, consultants, and trainers prove the value of their services? How do you do that? How can you justify it? This is the question. And I think a lot of us are facing this challenge. We found 3 different reasons, and I would like to share it with you. Before we do that, what is the lead indicator and precursor of quality decision making, responsible for 95% of business performance? What do you think? If you put it in the chat. 95% of business performance. Knowing the answer to this is important for us and also for the clients as well.
Chat is working now, sorry guys.
Data, psychological safety, information. I think data and information we have a lot, psychological safety, not so much. And that is the answer. Yet, when you ask the leaders, what's the psychological safety in your team, in your company, most of them couldn't answer the question. But this is how important it is. So there are 3 great disconnects. The first one is the knowledge gap. So if you look at research, 93% of business leaders know that psychological safety is important, but only less than 20% of them have a plan. They know how to measure it, maybe something, or how to have strategies. They know it's important, but they don't have a solution. And I think this 93% is kind of naive. I don't think that is true. But there's another one, and that is the incentive misalignment. So as coaches and trainers, often we choose this field because we are really passionate about people or maybe a specific field. And often it is based on lived experience. And we know that it works because it made a difference in our life. And we know that we can turn it into a business and we can help other people as well. It's obvious. People are important. Mindset is important. But the leaders have a very different duty. They have the duty to maximize shareholder value. Yes, they should care about people and everything, but at the end of the day, their duty is to maximize shareholder value. That's it. And that's exactly where the disconnect happens. Because we want them to understand how important people are, and they want us to help them make more money. So it seems like that we don't talk about the same thing. There is a disconnect. But there's another one, the wrong diagnosis. Because it is pretty clear by now, you can see from the numbers, that things are clearly going downhill. Clients need your solutions, but they don't want them. What could be the reason? Based on the last 10 years, this is what we found. The first one is that they think that they don't have an issue because they get used to everything. And people can do that. We don't have a problem. This is normal. We accept it. This is the norm. So if it doesn't hurt enough, why would I invest? Or they think that they have the solution. We could see that they're spending a lot of money. Do you think that they would think, oh, maybe it's not the right solution? No, we spend money, so it should be working. Or this is what we noticed a few times. They're afraid. What if we find something they don't like? This is the head in the sand approach. It's very difficult to fight that. So these are the three main issues. And technically, this is what we do within ICQ Global. We started more than 10 years ago, and we specialize in bridging that gap between the results and caring about people. We don't have to choose. We can do both. That's the beauty of it. So this webinar is about sharing the insights, because smart people learn from other people's mistakes and failures. And we made a lot of mistakes, and we had lots of success as well. Happy to share it. It's not about telling you what to do. These are just ideas and different approaches. So what if it feels right, but you are heading towards the wrong direction? This is often the question. People tend to be really confident. They get used to everything, and they are running on autopilot. That's not always good, because there is something called the dark triad of future risking solutions. These are the approaches that can cause more harm than good, while we believe that we are trying to save the company. I'm going to explain them a little bit. The first one is outdated and disconnected solutions. The second one, guess and hope-based solutions. And the third one, feels good, but makes no difference solutions. Once you have a label to something, it's much easier to notice them. And this is the goal. You can do a stock take and you can see, is this qualifying for this or not? The first one, optimizing something that shouldn't exist anymore. If you look at most of the leadership and management models, they were created by people who were born just after the American Civil War in the 19th century. Let's be honest, the world completely changed, but not the solutions we are using. That makes no sense. When they were created, less than 17% of the value was created by humans. They were seen as a cost to contain. Today, it's more than 90%. New challenges require new solutions. It's a no-brainer. We can see that. You cannot fix a smart TV with tools designed for black and white ones. Yes, you can try it harder. It's a different technology. It doesn't work the same way. And also, especially in big companies, they have so many different workshops, so many different models that they don't master any of them, and people don't realize that they speak different languages. Different assessments measure different things. They use different colors, metaphors. It's like speaking different languages. We have this illusion that we understand each other, but usually that's not exactly the case. This is what we noticed. But the second member of the dark triad, guess and hope-based solutions. It's hard to optimize something we cannot see. So if you ask providers about their programs, often they said, is it useful or entertaining? They would say, off the chart both. Fantastic solutions. But when you check reality, you realize that they are mostly entertaining, but not too useful. And this is exactly what the MIT slow management really wanted to understand. How come most of the programs return negative return on investment? How's that possible? And they had to realize that often people make a decision based on packaging, like the corporate Tinder profile. And also the evaluation is based on how informative or entertaining something was, not how valuable. They didn't measure the impact on the people who mattered the most, the team. Nobody followed the trajectory of the leaders. Just because people loved the workshop, it doesn't mean that it was valuable. It's not the same thing. We are not in the business of entertainment. We have to provide value. And you optimize what you measure. And this is also the problem, that well-being is important. There are a lot of programs. But that was a really interesting research. They analyzed 90 different interventions, and only one of them had a slightly positive impact, and that was volunteer work, nothing else. A yoga class is fantastic, just like a free lunch, but does it lead to engagement? No, it leads to entertainment. Or maybe it's easier to bear the pain, but it has not much to do with engagement. And at the same time, if you look at the companies, that is based on the white paper, then only 30% of companies measured engagement with some kind of survey, and 0 measured psychological safety or inclusion. How crazy is that? But the interesting insight from that white paper is that it doesn't matter how big or small the company was. They were facing very similar challenges, and they had very similar solutions, not data-driven. So something is important, but there's no solution. And the third member of the triad is feels good but makes no difference solutions. This is when something feels familiar or expensive and we think that it works. A lot of companies invest in growth mindset, and it's fantastic if you have it, and people get really excited about it. But Carol Dweck, who coined the term, said that you can have off-the-chart growth mindset, but if your environment is not nurturing, it's not supportive, it's not inclusive, it's not psychologically safe, it has zero benefit because you are going to drown in toxicity. So it's nice to think that you have growth mindset, but you cannot ignore the power of the environment. So it feels good to attend the training, but it's not going to make a difference. That's the problem with that. Again, we are not in the business of entertainment. So what we should measure that matters, that's the question. And when I say matters, what I'm referring to is business performance, bridging that gap, that you care about people, you support people, but you also make money, and you can also justify and prove why your solutions are valuable, not just nice to have. There are three proven invisible forces that make or break a team that directly link to engagement, growth, and profit. The first one is cognitive diversity, the only layer of diversity that has proven benefit in terms of performance. The way people think, the way they process information. The invisible layer, it's often called the immune system of a team. And we just have to understand it that it's often not too pleasant. It's uncomfortable. But we know exactly that growth requires the right amount of friction. So imagine that there is a very complicated issue, and we have a wonderful manager called Emily. She's very smart. And she employs a lot of smart people. But she doesn't realize that homophilic diversity is the strongest force in team dynamics. And even though it sounds like a disease, it just means that we like and trust people who are similar to us. People who have common sense, people who see the world like us. So a team can be individually really, really smart, but collectively blind because they are way too similar, even if they look different. And we have plenty of case studies. This was, for example, 10 senior leaders from 8 different countries. On the surface, really diverse. Deep inside, they were very, very similar. Look at this. For example, if you look at this as a range of perspectives, approaches to problems and opportunities, all the 10 people are within this range. But that's also normal. Why would you employ somebody who annoys you, who disagrees with you, who has a different pace? You don't need that hassle in your life. No, we have a lot in common. We connect. Fantastic. So we can all agree on something, but it doesn't make it true because we have a huge blind spot. And that's where cognitive diversity is important. And this is not unique. So this is where we use global DISC, which is not like a standard psychometric assessment. We go into the 3 layers of the identity. And it's really important because 95% of our actions are driven by values and beliefs we are not even aware of. But we think that we are so logical and objective. That's just not true. So we take the assessment, we learn about what we do, how, and most importantly, why. But once we have this, we're not going to use it as an excuse. No, because often authenticity can turn into a glorified fixed mindset. No, we use it as a starting point. Because once I understand this, we can measure the mindset gap between me and different countries. I can measure the mindset gap between 2 people, maybe troubleshooting. If you are brave enough, you can use it with couples. The underlying concept is the same. We can measure the gap between the leader and the team. And that's when they understand that, that's why I try to motivate people, but somehow it backfires. This is not a topic that is based on common sense and good intention. And we can see that because there are 2 different main approaches to understanding people. One is the intercultural solutions, talking about different countries, the 5 do's and don'ts, which is great, but it has not much to do with science, especially when it comes to teams. Because more than 80% of cultural differences exist within countries, not between them. That's really important. And we all belong to 15 or 20 culture groups at the same time. And the poorest container of culture is country of origin, gender, and generation, according to research. Which means that based on these categories, you cannot predict an individual's values and beliefs. That has nothing to do with science. The country-specific approach is important for global mobility. If you move to Germany, learn about what's normal, what's typical. But if your success depends on how well you understand individuals, if that's your client, your boss, your colleague, or your partner at home, they can be truly, truly misleading. You cannot create a high-performing team based on passports. That has, especially not in a hybrid environment, that has nothing to do with science. This is another case study. Everybody grew up in Jakarta, in Indonesia. Everybody, all the participants. Barely anyone was statistically average. But I can guarantee that all of them learned how to be normal, how to act normal. Because culture is not who we are, it's what we are used to. That's a big difference. Yes, that conditioning is important, but on the individual level, it's very different. We had a case study with a big German company. They employed a lot of Brazilian engineers, and we had to create a high-performing team. Of course, we can start with the Brazilian German approach, huge difference. But when we looked at cognitive diversity, it turned out that the Brazilian engineers were much more German inside than most Germans. And that was like a psychological permission for them. Yes, they have to learn how to buy a bus ticket, but on a cognitive level, it was the right country and profession. And that's not a surprise, because you don't choose your country of origin, gender, or generation, but you have to learn how to be normal. But when you choose your profession, then ideally choose something that is closer to your personal preferences. So if you look at 10 engineers from 10 different countries, then deep inside, probably they are going to be much more similar than 10 random people from the same country, gender, or generation. And that's my point. International knowledge is not cultural intelligence. That's a tiny, tiny fraction of that. And it's for a specific purpose. But the other approach is the psychometric assessments, and there are a lot of them. And I'm not criticizing any of them because all of them, or most of them, are useful for a specific purpose. The problem is when people overpromise and underdeliver, or they misunderstand them. So imagine that you profile this sunflower and you know everything about it. Fantastic. But where do you put this sunflower? In the snow, in the desert, in the middle of the jungle, or in the right environment? Depending on where you put it, you get very different results. We don't exist in isolation. And let's be honest, you can put very different people in a team, and most of them are going to conform to certain norms, so I'm not going to see the personal differences anyway. But those differences can cause a lot of friction inside. So going back to Emily, now she is fully certified and she knows everything about the topic. Now she can build a high-performing team where you have a lot of different perspectives. But we just have to understand that the benefits of cognitive diversity are not automatic. Because diversity without inclusion turns into painful liability. We can see that. What happened in the D&I field? Focusing on 99% on visible layer of diversity, nothing about inclusion, the invisible force that makes it work. That's the problem with that. It's not automatic. So we also have to create the right environment, which is high on psychological safety and motivation. We have to create it. Psychological safety is not a new thing. In 1788, they created the Chimney Sweeper Act in the UK when people got really angry when they realized that the minimum age to become a chimney sweeper apprentice was 4 years old. Can you imagine that today? Little babies go up on the roof clean. No. So it took maybe 250 years, and now we have the same health and safety standards pretty much everywhere, at least officially. But recently, they added a fifth category, the psychosocial one, because they realized that an attack on your psychological safety can cause more damage than a slap in the face. But how do you prove it? How do you optimize it? That is the question. But then when Google wanted to understand what is the secret of high-performing teams, then they realized it is psychological safety, the #1 trait of high-performing teams. Yet you ask the leaders, 99% of them cannot answer the question, where is my team? But that's the #1 trait. They assume a lot, they guess, but there is no real answer. On its own, psychological safety is not important, or at least it's not enough. But you also need motivation because we are not a family. No, we are a professional team. So we need safety, but we also need motivation. And Daniel Pink has a really interesting take on it. So he talks about the motivation, the evolution of motivation. 1.0, make babies survive. That's enough. But then when we had to learn how to interact with other people, then we had to upgrade it to motivation 2.0, extrinsic motivators, the pain and pleasure principle, the carrot and the stick. Here's the challenge. We get used to everything, so you have to punish and reward people more and more to get the same results. But what the research shows is that when it comes to creativity and white-collar jobs, it doesn't work, it backfires. That's the problem with that. So if you want to take it to the highest level, then unfortunately you have to get to know people. You have to understand what they really want. You have to tap into intrinsic motivators. These are the ones that are coming from inside. That's how you create a high-performing and motivating team. And that's important because Chris Voss, the FBI negotiator, said there's no such thing as logical, only what matters to someone. And once you understand what matters to someone, you can motivate them. You can create the right environment. But that might be very different from yours. And that's the reason why common sense and good intention can backfire. And sometimes this is also the problem. How do you quantify it? Once you can quantify something, you can put it in the report, it becomes real. If you just talk about it, then often they just reject it, that, oh, that's a subjective opinion, that's not real. But when you see how your team members feel, then it becomes real. Because if they score high on both, then they're in the growth zone. They score low on both, apathy. Anxiety is when you have motivation, but no safety. And comfort zone is when you have safety, but no motivation. And as you can see, a team can be in the growth zone because we know that numbers can lie, especially averages, or at least they can hide the truth. But if you look at individuals, you can see that this team is very polarized. Some people are like fish in the water, others feel rejected and demotivated. And according to Amy Edmondson, even if you have one outlier, it can affect performance by 30 or 40%. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter whose fault it is, but it is everybody's responsibility to fix it because it's affecting everyone. Unfortunately, we had a really bad case study in Scandinavia, oil and gas company, including the CEO and the senior leadership team. They were in the apathy zone. And during our program, one of the refineries burned down because nobody cared about the health and safety. It depended on who was in charge. But on a positive note, there was one of the biggest mining companies in Indonesia. They had 17 accidents a week. And after 6 months, they had 0. And they won the most prestigious awards in health and safety. They turned psychological safety into physical safety. This is how much it matters. It's not just be nice to people. It's not about this is the cheat sheet, 5 things to do, and then it's going to be all right. No, but it is possible. But we have to make it intentional, tangible, and we have to quantify it. And often, this is the most frustrating slide. When you ask leaders, where is your team? Are they in the growth zone when they score high on all 3 invisible forces? Time bomb when you have an issue with 1? Decline when you have a problem with 2? Or is it game over? Where is your team and how do you know? Very simple questions, and most of them cannot answer. They know how much the employees enjoy the workshop, yes, or how much they spend on well-being programs, yes, but they have no idea about these things, and that is affecting the business. So why is it critical to measure what matters? So here's an embarrassing example, but it's also personal. This is the dashboard of our car. And as a real man, because you know that men are really good at cars apparently, I looked at it, I saw the battery was almost half. I thought, okay, let me Google it really quickly how I can charge it, because I got the charger from my brother. So I charged the battery all night. I start the engine in the morning, it's even lower than before. I said, something is not right. So I called my brother and he asked me, do you know that you have two batteries in the car? I said, no, I didn't. So this is the one that I can charge when I slow down. So I cannot physically charge it. So, okay. So my point is that I put a lot of effort into something to solve a problem that wasn't the real issue, because I didn't know about that. I had the intention, I had the effort, I was really motivated. I did the wrong thing. I didn't have the right information. So if you cannot measure what matters, then you might optimize something that shouldn't exist anymore, or you solve a problem that is not the real issue. That's exactly what I did. And for at least 12 hours, I was really proud of myself. I thought, finally, a stereotype. Or you might struggle with proving the value of your work and the ROI of the program. Proving how much something people enjoyed is great, but not in our industry, at least not anymore. Or you can also endanger the future of the company while you believe that you are doing the right thing. And that is the real danger, because it's affecting employees and their families as well. And that's not fair. So I asked you this evil question in the beginning. How would you ruin the company? I asked ChatGPT, and that robot came up with 6 steps. So as you can see that within the 3 invisible forces, you have the 9 biomarkers directly linked to profit, growth, and engagement, business. So step 1, suppress psychological safety. So people don't speak up, they don't share anything, there's no inclusivity. Step 2, and you had this answer, micromanagement. So you undermine autonomy and accountability. People get disengaged really quickly. Favoritism, collaboration breaks down. Number 4, undermining growth and development. So that's how you lose your best people and you keep the worst ones. Short-term gains, lose purpose. It's not important. Let's be reactive instead of responding to challenges. Poor communication damages collaboration, inclusivity. It isolates people. It confuses people. So these are the 6 steps. But here's the problem with that. We had hundreds of team scans, and we noticed very similar behaviors. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you do it intentionally or unintentionally, the outcome is the same. You're risking the future of your company. And that's why I asked that question, because if you can stop doing those things, then it's already better. And this is what I promise, that you don't have to choose. You can bridge that gap between caring about people and making money. We don't have to choose. We do both. This is one of our examples. Fortune 500 automotive company in the US. Global leadership team. As you can see, that's not fantastic. Very disengaged people. Not a good place. But they are leading thousands of people. 6 months later, they were here. Not everybody was in the growth zone, but they made a lot of progress. And if you look at the biomarkers, we can show them exactly how the team dynamics changed. Psychological safety, 30% up, motivation, 25. As you can see, everything went up. Unfortunately, the tension score as well in 4 different biomarkers, which means that people felt different. At the end of the day, we don't know why. Not right now, but that's why we have this 4-step process. First, we measure it, we get the data. Then we visualize it, which means that we discuss the results with the people, because we have only the data, but people have the insights. So the ultimate goal is to create meaningful conversations driven by data and rooted in science. Nothing can replace that. But at the same time, how do you talk about something that you are not aware of? Often we have this gut feeling that I like you or I don't, but I don't really know why. How can we fix it then? That makes it difficult. So once you have the vocabulary and a frame of reference, then it changes. Every year we have 2 certifications. The next one is in March. And the next one after that, not sure, but probably the autumn. Data-driven leadership, team, and culture development. ICF accredited, and it works. It's the highest level. I think there is a really big gap in the market, and that is data-driven leadership and team development. It's not instead of coaching, not instead of training, but this is the one that can bridge the gap between caring for people and making money and proving our value. If somebody would like to know more about it, happy to share the information. We don't do any annual fee and royalty and all the nasty things. Your success is our business model, and it's not just a cheap strapline. It is true, actually. It can be frustrating sometimes, but we stick with it. That's the point. So it's everybody's interest to help. Can we go even deeper? There is the question. Yes, but that is going to happen next time. So I'm pretty sure that this picture is quite familiar to you. You know, the problem is crystal clear, the solution is crystal clear, but in between you have people who have very different ideas. And all of them feel that they are the champions of justice. So when everything is fine, you have the right environment, it's great. But under pressure, what happens? This is when the teams break into silos of people who think similarly. This is when the derailers take over constructive behaviors. The biases distort objective thinking, and that can ruin psychological safety and motivation. This is the game changers approach. And this is going to be the topic of our next webinar when we go into the details, how we can go as deep as possible.